A Roaring Fork Schools production.
Welcome everyone to Roaring Fork Schools Radio. My name is Irania Silva. I'm the bilingual communication specialist for the Roaring Fork School District. And today is our first episode, and I'm here with our superintendent, Dr. Jesus Rodriguez.
So thank you for being here. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm doing well and really glad to be here.
Awesome. So, as you know, in the Roaring Fork Schools, we always start out with a crew activity. I'll go ahead and start by sharing the story of the origins of my name. So, my name is Yerania, but originally it was Geranium. And because my grandmother is a Spanish speaking person, she wasn't able to pronounce my name and she would call me anything but Geranium and she would call me Geranio or Yeranio. And eventually, my mom just made the decision to take me back to the civil registry and of vital records and officially changed my name to Yerania. So it's not my original name, but it is my name by fate. So tell us a little bit more about your name.
Yeah. That's a great story. My name is Jesus Gerardo. My first name, Jesus, was selected by my mom for a couple of reasons. So, the first is because I'm the middle child. I have an older sister, and my mom was praying to have a son and committed to naming me Jesus if she got one. And then the second reason is because it was the name of her father. My maternal grandfather was named Jesus too. My middle name, Gerardo, is my dad's only name.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. That's a cool story, too.
Well, we're going to take a little bit of time today to talk about some of the things related to basically our culture and origins and things that have been happening in our district for the past couple of months. For example, in September, the Board of Education adopted a proclamation to honor Hispanic Heritage Month. Can you share a little bit more about why this is so important?
Yeah, I think it was important for our school board to honor Hispanic Heritage Month because we are a school district community that is majority Hispanic. So nearly 60% of our students identify as Hispanic, and about half of our students speak Spanish as their first language. So, on one hand, it was important to acknowledge this part of our community. But another reason that it was important is because it acknowledges both our commitment to achieve equity for our Hispanic community, but also the fact that we have a lot of work to do because there are very large differences in achievement between our Hispanic and white students in our district right now.
Right. Yeah. And you touched a little bit about this in your most recent column that was published in the Post Independent last month. And it was about learning and celebrating diverse cultures all year long. What does this mean to you?
Yeah, so I wrote the column that way because Hispanic Heritage Month had just ended. But it was important for me to say that just because it ended doesn't mean we have to stop learning about or celebrating Hispanic heritage and culture. So, on the same note, we just started Native American Heritage Month on November 1st. So, again, it's important to celebrate the history and culture and learn about Native Americans, but we should be engaging in that type of learning all year around. It's important for me to say that we don't wait until February to learn about Black history or wait until March to learn about the fight for equal rights for women.
Hmm.
I think we should be engaging in those kinds of conversations throughout the year. So, for example, yes, let's celebrate Hispanic heritage during the month of September and October, but let's also continue to select books that are written by Hispanic authors or books that tell the stories of Hispanic characters throughout the year. Let's also continue to do outreach in our community, invite folks who are Hispanic or Latinx to come to the school and do guest readings or speak in classrooms. That's true about all cultures in our valley, and it's true that we should be learning about them throughout the year.
Yeah, of course. And you actually mentioned a little bit about the reading, and you talked about an essay called "Mirrors, Windows, and Sliding Glass Doors." Can you explain a little bit more about this concept?
Yes, so mirrors are books that refer to authors or characters that reflect your identity. So for me, for example, as a Latino male, the mirrors are books that are written by Latinos or about Latinos. That's a mirror text for me. Windows are the books that are written either by authors or about characters that are different from you. So it gives you a view into their world, just as your view through the window would be.
Mm-hmm.
And then sliding glass doors are similar to the windows. Something that's different about that is it gives students the opportunity to imagine other worlds for themselves, and they can open that sliding glass door and step through those. So, like an example I like to give is for a Latina student who could imagine themselves as the first Latina president. We haven't had a Latina president that they can look to in a mirror, but they could imagine themselves as the first one, and becoming the first Latina president could become a reality for them.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thank you for explaining a little bit more on that. What are some of the things that you've learned through your listening and learning efforts from school communities that relate to these concepts and this idea of celebrating our similarities and our differences?
I've had the opportunity to engage with a lot of students, staff, parents, and community members over the last 4 months. And I guess I'll try to share two or three quick stories about some of the things that I've heard that are related. So, as you know, last week we hosted our first coffee chats, and we did those in Glenwood Springs and Carbondale and in Basalt. And at one of those chats, I was really inspired that about half of the group were bilingual. So, Latina
Mm-hmm.
moms who spoke Spanish and English, but also white moms who spoke Spanish and English. And then about a quarter of the audience was mostly Spanish speaking, and another quarter was like mostly English speaking. One of the things I was really inspired by is that uh, during the coffee chat, if I was talking in Spanish, the parents were interpreting for each other in English. And if I was speaking in English or with a parent who was speaking to me in English, they would also interpret for Spanish speakers. And it was really neat to see that. And in fact, one of the moms asked the table, they said, how do we create this sense of community in other spaces outside of this chat? So, they talked about engaging with each other more with their kids' sports teams and
Mm-hmm.
going to each other's houses and engaging with each other when they see each other in the community and grocery shopping and things like that. So it was really an exciting conversation to hear that from community and parent perspective, that there's this desire for the community to be able to communicate with each other, whether in English or in Spanish. Similarly, at another coffee chat in a different community, heard from parents, including, you know, white parents who predominantly English speaking, who have this desire for their children to grow up bilingual and to attend dual language schools and to graduate from high school having earned the seal of biliteracy. And so there was this emphasis on everybody in our community should have the opportunity to learn another language, whether your first language is English and you're learning Spanish, or whether your first language is Spanish and you're learning English, because ultimately our students will graduate from our schools and continue to be community members here who can communicate with each other. And again, as I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation today, about half of our community are Spanish speakers, right? And so it was really inspiring to hear the community having this desire to just improve on that. I also have student advisory councils in each of the high schools, and I'm hearing from students things like recently, a current senior shared with me that, and this is a white student who has had the opportunity to read a lot of books that are mirrors. So, a lot of books that are written by white authors about white characters, but they regretted that in their entire 4 years of high school, they've only had the opportunity to read two books that were windows for them. books that were either written by or about people of color. On the other hand, if you're a student of color who's also a senior, you would have only had the opportunity to read two books that are mirrors, and mostly reading books that are windows. Again, books written by white authors or about white characters. And so, what I'm hearing also from students is they have the desire to read not just more books that are mirrors, but also more books that are windows. And every book has the opportunity to be that depending on how you identify. So those have been really exciting comments. And then just really quickly too, we just had a equity advisory council meeting last night that has a lot of parents, staff, students that are a part of it. And at large, the community, staff included, are sharing that, we have this desire to learn more about our diverse cultures here in the Valley, similarities and differences, and ultimately being able to communicate with each other.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I had the honor to join a couple of those coffee chats with you, and it was very heartwarming to see how the parents who don't really resemble us were Hispanic, and so they're Anglo Americans who, like you said, are predominantly English speakers, and they want their children to experience a bicultural type of education as well as experience for integrating with their peers. So that was great to learn. I just want to go back a little bit. You mentioned the Student Advisory Council. Would you be able just to explain a little bit what that is and what it means, just for those parents who don't really know what a Student Advisory Council is?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll start by sharing that when I was a candidate for the superintendency here, I had the opportunity to be interviewed by a group of students at one of our high schools. And one of the questions that they asked me was, what are you going to do to make school more fun? And my response to them was, well, I have a lot of ideas about how we might be able to make school more fun. But I think what we need to do is hear from you. You tell us what we could do to make school more fun. And that conversation or interaction with that student in that interview inspired me to make this commitment to hear from our students regularly. And so I made this commitment to start the student advisory councils. Right now, it's a group of students at each of the high schools who I'm meeting with monthly, and they are advising me on topics that are important to them, giving ideas and feedback about how we can improve the student experience. So it's been really great. Also, when I was a candidate, I talked a little bit about context sensitive design, which is a decision making process used in transportation. It's the decision making process that was used to build a highway through Glenwood Canyon. And the idea was, what do we need to preserve? And in that case, thinking about the natural beauty of the canyon, but also, where can we innovate? Because there was a time when people thought it was impossible to build a highway through a canyon, but it was able to be done with community input. And so this year, I'm really committed to listening and learning both about what are the things that are going well that we need to preserve and continue to do, but also what are the things that we can be doing better, where we can innovate and improve. And so my conversations, whether with staff, with parents, with community members, or with students, are really focused on learning more about those two things.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think everyone who lives in the valley knows that the I-70 corridor is a little complicated, but without a doubt, it is one of the most beautiful interstates in our nation. So it's pretty enlightening to hear that within our district, we could expect the same type of beautiful things happening in the future. So thank you for sharing all of that. And for all of those that couldn't attend the online or in-person sessions, we are pretty active on our social media. So make sure that you follow us on Facebook. Make sure you're subscribed to all of our remind notifications so that you can receive any future community events. We are expecting to hold one, I believe, the week of November 28th. We will have more coffee chats posted, so stay tuned for those dates, times, and locations. But again, thank you so much, Dr. Rodriguez, for being here and explaining a little bit more about what you do for our district.
Thank you.
And a huge thank you to all of our listeners. We'll see you back here again on Friday, December 3rd at 10 a.m.